All right, welcome back. You're watching Liquid Lunch. I'm John Tobacco, and lots going on, especially with the riots and the protests, and how it's pushed COVID right off the main stage in the news. So somebody who knows a lot about field organizing, somebody who wrote speeches for former President George H.W. Bush. And one of the co-founders of the Tea Party movement, Michael Johns, joins us right now, as he does every Friday. Hey, Mike, how are you?
Don, how are you? Happy Friday to you.
Happy Friday to you. Mike, I spoke about it in my open. It sure feels like to me that, the riots have taken COVID right off the front page. It's not like the major national news story anymore like it was every day. Now it's the riots. I'm just starting to see the inklings last night on MSNBC of the states where it's already spiking back up that have opened, which are coincidentally most of them riot places. And I really think they don't want to let Donald Trump out on the campaign trail versus Joe Biden out on the campaign trail. So it's just a continuous conundrum of finding chaos to keep the campaign on mute. What do you think?
I certainly see it two sets of standards as it relates to enforcing these social distancing policies. I mean, just weeks ago, we were looking at individuals that were being, literally cited and arrested for showing up for religious services, for instance, or, gun stores and others that were being cited because they attempted to keep their businesses going during this taxing period. And those were handled very seriously. And now all of a sudden we have protests, some violent, some not. And there's almost no police activity or law enforcement engagement as it relates to these policies. So, I mean, it seems to me just as a statement of a matter of general principle and fact that they either need to be taken seriously or not taken seriously. And I think the fact that they're not being taken seriously now is just bolsters our position that we were perhaps overreacting in a large number of areas in this country. But I do think, John, that one of the great risks in both of these crises, both the coronavirus pandemic, which has been immensely taxing to the country in a whole bunch of ways, and now in the riots stemming from the George Floyd murder, we run the risk of pointing the finger in the wrong direction. And I'm concerned that there seems to be some sort of operating presumption that the President of the United States is directly responsible for this, for either of these. And in fact, really just the opposite is the case. When you think about the steps that were taken against coronavirus, which clearly came from China, it was Trump's assertiveness and aggressiveness that cut off China travel and mobilized the entire federal government to contain the damage of coronavirus. And then when you look even at the issue of the policing activities in Minneapolis with this one individual officer, it really is Trump all the way back to the 2016 campaign. And it's been sustained throughout his governance of putting focus and attention on the issues of African Americans in urban communities and on criminal justice reform. I mean,
yeah, look, Mike, I hate to say it, but probably when Trump was running, criminal justice reform was not on the top of mine or your menu of things we wanted to see. And the way it kind of evolved, I'm with you. African American unemployment was the lowest in history. African American home ownership was the highest or close to the highest in history. And all of a sudden, out of the blue, the First Step Act, actually, there were people that were against it. There were crimes that were classified as nonviolent that may have been somewhat violent, but he still made a tremendous inroads with trying to fix things. And, everything he does just gets turned against him in some way, it seems.
Yeah, I mean, this isn't just an issue of him being the most criminal justice reform-minded Republican of our lifetimes. He's the most criminal justice reform-minded president of our lifetimes. Obama did absolutely nothing in 8 years with nothing but opportunity to have reformed some of these policies. Biden, even worse, was a champion of the 3 strikes and you're out policy and has been even now proposing vast expansions in police funding in some of these areas, completely contradicting the message of these protesters. So I think you have to look at the president, at least as it relates and try to bring ourselves back to where we were, even 12 or so weeks ago, where we had an economy that was humming on all cylinders, more Americans employed than at any time in our history, GDP that was pushing 3% for the first time in over a decade. And all of these statistics as it relates to urban environments improving, including crime statistics dropping dramatically in almost every category, in murder and burglary and in larceny. All of these statistics improving, African American wages rising, African American unemployment at its lowest numbers. This is not a president who accomplished these things by accident. He came in and put a singular focus on the need to address these issues. And so you had vast improvements in African American economies. You had the permanent funding of African American, the traditionally historical African American colleges, which Obama could have gotten around to and never did. This president did it, putting hundreds of millions of dollars into those colleges and universities. And then, of course, as you correctly cited, the criminal justice reform, which for the first time really in American history starts to look at these mandatory minimums and prison conditions and the lack of empathy for some of these defendants and begins to address it. Right. It's the easiest thing in the world with mandatory minimums for every one of these state legislatures to come forward and say, I'm going to increase it. It takes real political boldness to take the step of reducing it, which this president's done.
No doubt about it. Hey, Mike, in our last couple minutes here, I know, you were one of the guys that got the whole Tea Party movement. So I have done plenty of grassroots rallies and protests and demonstrations, here at the local level. You did it huge on the national level. But we had one here on behalf of small business owners who want to unlock their businesses last week. We had about 300 people there. And we told the cops where we were having it. They wouldn't let us use any amplified sound. They warned us over and over that everyone should be spaced out and everyone better have a mask. And we did it good. And to your point in the beginning, how hard is it to get a good demonstration? And then, when the cops have no power, I guess that's when it gets out of control. I don't know. I never saw yours get out of control.
Never. I mean, my point is when you have specific policy reforms that you want to see instituted, and I could certainly see strong case, this would be an opportunity to make an argument for some reforms in police tactics. You don't resort to violence. You resort to violence when you can't articulate or put your finger on what specific reforms you're looking for. So I think it's almost a mistake to suggest that the violent activities that are occurring throughout the country in these urban areas are designed to change any policies. It's simply hooliganism, and it's designed to, really just serve as an outlet for some of these individuals who I think would be doing it otherwise, and if they were in other different circumstances. So there's really no broader message that comes out of it, and the best guidance I could give anyone who is engaged in any issue is you keep these events nonviolent, and then you be very specific about what you want to see changed and why you want to see it changed. And if that were being done, I think you would have more of the country empathetic, sympathetic, and supportive with these efforts than you do when they see violence and their inclination is to shut it off and turn against it.
Without a doubt. Mike, when you look at this as a great organizer yourself, I had this Project Veritas video yesterday where they had an undercover guy at a meeting where they were telling him, engage in hand-to-hand combat, go after their eyeballs because they're easier to hurt, strike your victim, but, not keep hitting them when they're down, right? This is all like undercover video stuff. Yeah. Do you see, our last minute, do you see some level of organization that's classical or like you can tell when you see the rioters, not the peacefuls, the rioters?
Right. Yes, you can. The answer is you can, and that's being amplified by the Department of Justice, which also is suggesting, and by the way, this may not even be orchestrated by individuals in our country. It could be outside of our country. There's a lot of forces in the world that want to see chaos, even a revolutionary environment in the United States. And I think when you see bricks arriving in mass from unknown locations, neatly stacked, and you see the magnitude of resources and organization that's gone into some of this violence, it suggests that it is being highly funded and highly organized, which means there's an indisputable agenda
All right.
behind it.
All right. Thanks a lot, Mike. We got to leave it there. Michael Johns, thank you. We'll talk to you next week. Thank you for being there, but don't go everywhere. We're doing a little Funny Friday. We're going to do that right after this.